This is TurnOneThoughtseize. I'm Ahren.
And I'm Chris.
We have an unbelievably special guest with us today. He is known, among many other things, as the Innovator, capital T, capital I. Mr. the Patrick Chapin is with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So first off, obviously, thank you so much for taking the time out. We really appreciate you coming on. So let's jump right into it. We talked a little bit last week about some of the Grixis flavors that are running around in Modern right now, and the thing that actually had sort of spurred this was a listener of ours reached out on Twitter and said, hey, can you talk about Patrick Chapin's Grixis list? And I said, well, I mean, we can talk about it, but who better than the man to talk to us about it? So Grixis Control, 13-2, 9th place at GP Charlotte. A pretty sleek list, if I do say so myself.
So it looks like it's gained a little bit of traction in the last couple of weeks since then. Somebody top-aided the Grand Prix on the over in Europe the following weekend using was basically my suggested update to the list. Just a couple of tweaks from my article talking about some of the card choices a couple of the changes I'd make, and from the sound of it, it was one of the most popular and successful decks on day 2 of that GP. The thing I'm excited about is a bunch of my friends have qualified for the Modern Festival on Magic Online with variants of it. Paul Cheon, Jerry Thompson, and Michael Jacob all qualified for the Modern Festival using only slightly updated lists. They don't want to change too much, but just changing a couple key cards. Definitely a super fun deck, and I highly, highly recommend it.
So the list that I'm looking at right now, I don't know if it's the new list or the old list. It's 4 Snaps, 2 Anglers, 2 Tasker the Golden Fang, 4 Visions.
You said how many fatties was that?
It was 3 and 2 Angler and Tasker.
Yep, exactly.
And then Visions, Thought Scour, Miser, Shadow Doubt.
That one was it was super sweet for that tournament. And it definitely performed well, but it got so much press that I think that people are playing around it a little bit more.
Sure.
So I'm not sure I would. I think you might want to replace that one with either an extra main deck Dispel or an extra Remand. I know actually. I think Michael Jacob was actually either Michael Jacob or Paul Cheon. One of the two of them was experimenting recently with a main deck Flash Freeze actually. Which I don't know. I don't know if I get behind that one yet, but it is definitely, it's at least reasonable to consider. Yeah. And then Deprive is the other alternative that you could potentially consider one of those. It's hard to play Deprive when you play so much Cryptic Command, but Deprive is a pretty good card in Modern right now.
Yeah, Deprive seems pretty good. I have some familiarity running it in more of the Delver lists, but with only 22 lands in an actual control list trying to cast Cryptic, it seems a lot more difficult.
Yeah, my advice would be first to play Remand in that slot, which does help draw a little bit of mana also. But I would actually play one more land than I played at the GP. I would I think that it's funny you should mention Cryptic Command because I think that the single biggest change that I've learned, and from talking with Cheon and Jerry and MJ, they all did the same thing. They all said that because everybody loves Cryptic Command and wants to play as much Cryptic Command as they can. Paul Cheon, I think, is out of that group the one that was most on the camp of wanting to just play 4 Cryptics till he dies, just like me. But at the end of the day, I think that it's just too many people play cheap Countermagic right now. I think it's 3 Cryptic Commands in this deck. But I do think either way you want to add 1 land more than I played at the GP. And I think Blood Crypt is that land because there's some sideboard cards we play now that make you really want to be able to search up a Blood Crypt in some scenarios.
Right. So the rest is just a pretty standard Countermagic suite that I'm seeing in like I said, what I think is the old list. 2 Mana Leak, 2 Spell Snare, a single Remand, a single Dispel, And then the cards that we love: 4 bolts, 4 terminates, 2 Kolaghan's Command, and Electrolyze, and 22 lands. So 23. Math-wise, I don't know how that impacts the odds of curving out to 4.
Well, so it's very complicated. The math is kind of library manipulation. Whether you Serum Vision spells to the bottom of your deck or not, whether you Electrolyze to draw a card on turn 3, whether you Snapcaster a Bolt or a Thought Scour. So it's actually very, very complicated how all that works out. But the much more important question is how much you can actually support the first 2 turns of the game. And the reason that I think you actually want to add a 23rd land, funny enough, is because of the Creeping Tar Pits. I think Creeping Tar Pit is good, but I do think that that there is some cost because of Creeping Tar Pit coming into play tapped. If you keep a 1-land hand where Creeping Tar Pit, or Sulphur Falls does the same thing too. If you keep a 1-land hand with Sulphur Falls or Creeping Tar Pit, you're a little slower to fix your hand than you would like, even if you have multiple cantrips in your hand. 2 cantrips and a Tar Pit or a Sulphur Falls on the draw, you still have to discard the hand size if you don't hit immediately.
Right.
And that's actually, even with the Serum Visions, if you don't just naturally draw a land, you're going to have to discard a hand size. And so if you could instead, slightly increasing the odds by playing that 23rd land would not only avoid having to discard a hand size, but let you continue to develop your board. Plus, Blood Crypt is great anyway. Being able to turn 1 Lightning Bolt is valuable, and it untaps the Sulphur Falls for you. And the big thing is being able to use any of your fetch lands that can go get it so that you can cast both Anger of the Gods and Damnation after sideboarding. Plus, it's just nice to have a reliable land that can't be choked, that makes all the rest of your colors.
Right. Did you play around with filter lands at all for this list?
So yeah, this list specifically I did not, but I've played with filter lands a ton. They are awesome. Normally, I always look to see if I can get any filter lands because the power level of those cards is so high that if they make sense in your deck at all, you should probably play them because they're probably better than... any deck that doesn't forbid them, they're usually awesome.
Yeah,
you can get away with.
Yeah,
lands, make all your colors.
Right. Is there room for tri-land real estate in here? Is that too greedy?
So first I don't like Crumbling Necropolis in here because the fetch lands are already effectively tri-lands.
Okay.
Fetch lands can already make whatever colors you want. And they also have the option to come into play untapped, which is really, really big. They only cost 1, for paying 1 life up front, you effectively get the tri-land all the time, and then some amount of the time you want to untap your land. Plus, they help speed up your delve creatures like Gurmag Angler and Tassiger. The filter lands, the reason I think that you end up moving away from them in this deck is that this deck, most of the cards only cost 1 mana. You want to be able to function on 1 land as much as possible. And you want to be able to do things like if you only have 2 lands, you want to be able to cast an Angler on your turn and hold up Dispel for your opponent's turn. And a filter land would not let you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that unfortunately, no filter lands and no tri-lands. It's got to be, the reason to play Sulphur Falls and Creeping Tar Pit, by the way, Creeping Tar Pit's great for having an extra threat and so to help avoid flooding out. Sulphur Falls I like because I like having a bunch of lands that don't get choked.
Yeah,
that's true too. There was a couple lists at a couple GPs that were even running lands just to play around choke.
Yeah, some of the Merfolk lists are running the one of Minamo, School of Water's Edge, and there was a guy, actually we were just talking about this before we got on, there's one of the Merfolk lists, I think, that top-aided...
It won. The winning Copenhagen list ran 4 of the blue-white Merfolk land just to play around choke.
4 Wanderwine hubs, just cause. And no white cards.
Yep. But, so earlier you mentioned Dispel. One thing I've noticed a lot in modern lists is the increase of the number of dispels in the 75 in total. Is that in any way a discouragement to run expensive things like Cryptic Command or Kolaghan's Command?
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely, it's discouraging. It is a disincentive to play expensive spells like Cryptic Command. In fact, I already expected Dispel to be very popular at the GP, and I wanted to play a ton of them myself, but it was even more popular than I was expecting, and after the GP, it surged to a spot where, I mean, basically, I think that right now, basically every blue deck should just have 4 Dispels in the 75.
Yeah.
And that's part of the impetus for going down to 3 Cryptic Commands. And it's something that's important to note. A lot of people don't do this, but when you play against other blue decks that are the type of deck that would have a ton of Dispels, it is okay to sideboard down on Cryptics. You can go down, sometimes it's not out of the question to go to 0 or 1, but I often will keep 2 against people, Architect of Thought or Keranos or Batterskull. If I think they have some expensive cards like that, then Cryptic is still good. But I strongly recommend having 4 Dispels in your 75. Okay. 1 or 2 main deck and the rest in the sideboard.
We were talking about Batterskull too, and just because Kolaghan's Command is everywhere, we were trying to think of Batterskulls that don't die to Kolaghan's Command, and we didn't really come up with anything.
Keranos is the Batterskull, right? Like Keranos is the one. You want a Batterskull that doesn't die to Kolaghan's Command. Keranos is your guy.
Oh, he's so good. We discussed maybe, because some people are just running 1 in the side, and man, I honestly think there's probably room for 2 in the main in certain decks.
Yeah, that was actually a question I wanted to ask you. So Jared Fabiano played Grixis Control at an open or an invitational recently. Grixis Control, where he was actually main decking Keranos as more of a win con instead of the Delve creatures. Can you weigh in on that, like the pros and cons of either?
I personally would not main deck it at all. I mean, I'm not even, I'm only medium on having it in the sideboard anyway, but I definitely understand why you would want to do it. It's very durable. It's very resilient. If you're expecting a lot of people playing with a lot of removal, Keranos is fantastic for that. It is a reliable way to generate a game-winning advantage in an attrition battle that's very difficult for people to interact with. The fact that it doesn't get countered by Dispel and die to very many cards at all. So, now that said, the reason I don't play it is that one of the most compelling reasons to play Grixis right now, in my opinion, is the tempo game. A sort of a fairies game where at times you look like a control deck, but on the drop of a hat, you can, drop of a dime, you can switch it on them and go super aggressive. Being able to play your threats for 1 mana is so big in a format like Modern, in a deck like this that has so many counterspells. I only really like Keranos if I know for sure in the matchup I can just, I'm like, okay, I know in this matchup I can just tap out to cast Keranos, and I don't think that that's a main deckable thing, at least not the style of Grixis deck that we're describing here. I kind of want to just play as much into the cheap Countermagic as possible, so I don't ever want to tap out during my main phase if I can help it.
Did you try or consider Stubborn Denial for this?
Absolutely. I play Stubborn Denial in a lot of Modern decks. And in fact, when I was, when I was playing Grixis with more fatties, I had Stubborn Denials. But and Stubborn Denial still would be playable. It's just that Dispel does what I want anyway. And Counter Squall is actually quite good as well. I like that Stubborn Denial is so cheap. I think that it's just a question of how often are you going to have your fatty already in play. In formats that have a lot of cards, if people are playing a lot of Mass Lilianas, anything that's like, if people are playing with cards that you want to counter, that's awesome. That Stubborn Denial is just, perfect. The trick, though, is that I thought that a lot of people would play with counterspells. I was expecting a lot of blue decks, which I ended up facing quite a few, like Twin and Grixis and so on. When people play that much permission, it's hard to rely on. because often what will happen is that on turn 3 you'll play your Tassiger or your Angler, and your opponent can like remand, and you can't protect it with Stubborn Denial.
Right.
And it just, and as a result, it doesn't always work out right. Now, I still think it's a totally fine card, but just the way, like, because of the fact that you don't just run your Angler the first opportunity you can. Back when I played Stubborn Denial at the Pro Tour, when I played Anglers and Tassigers back in DC, and that one I used 4 Stubborn Denials, actually. But that one had 8 fatties, and that one was much more focused on play a fatty as soon as possible. This deck, I mean, you'll usually not play Tassiger or Angler on turn 2 and instead just hold up a counterspell.
Right.
The nice thing about Tassiger and Angler here is that you can play them on turn 3 and still protect them. You just spell a lot of the time, or a Cell Snare.
Right.
You really do want to play a control game in the first few turns.
So let's talk about the sideboard. So what Chris found last week, even at our local F&M, or our local Modern Night, for Fulminator Mage, turns out is pretty solid.
Yeah.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah, Fulminator Mage is fantastic.
Was there a consideration for playing Fulminator Mage over, say, Molten Rain, for a possible like Hate Bears matchup where there's a Thalia or something like that in play, or is it just Value Town with Kolaghan's Command?
And the threat of it being in play, like it's sitting in play.
Yeah. So the threat of it being in play is hitting the nail on the head. That's the big one, because it is awesome, no question. But the Snapcaster Mage Molten Rain interaction is awesome too. Both of those interactions are awesome, The real issue is that I really rely on Fulminator Mage to combat mid-rangey, grindy decks like Jund and Abzan. Fulminator Mage can come down against them, and now it's a threat, because what always happens in those kind of matchups is that they board in a ton of removal to be able to kill Tassiger and Angler. And if you play Fulminator Mage, the removal is not going to be very effective against it. In a few turns in a row, that damage adds up in a big way. But even more importantly, those decks, some of their best weapons against you are Raging Ravine, Stirring Wild, Treetop Village, and or even sometimes, depending on their build, even the land that puts a +1/+1 counter on all your guys.
Gavany Township.
Gavany Township, yes. And having Fulminator Mage against those utility lands is very valuable. I also Fulminator Mage can come down when there isn't a land that you want to destroy yet. And that's actually a significant difference, because Molten Rain has to, like, for instance, if you're playing against Tron, you can only Molten Rain the lands that are in play, not the land that's in their hand. And Fulminator Mage can effectively get around that. That doesn't matter as much as it does against, for instance, Amulet. Against an Amulet deck, you can actually put down Fulminator Mage, and you don't even use them immediately. You hit the right land, because often the big land, they'll have all their land in play, might only make 1 mana, but they're going to play a land that will effectively make 2 or even 4 mana. But if you have a Fulminator Mage just sitting in your fancy Amulet or Taru tricks. Yeah. I like Molten Rain, but I do think Fulminator Mage is better for this deck. The other big thing, and this is actually very, very important, Fulminator Mage is very easy to cast in this deck.
Right.
Molten Rain is not trivial. It's much harder to come by double black or double red, so you have to be sure you really want it, because some amount of the time you're not going to get there because of, we just don't play that many land, and we're split between 3 colors, and we're trying to support Cryptic Command.
So there's Dispels in there, obviously, which we've already touched on. Anger of the Gods, I'm assuming mainly for the Collected Company decks, Elves, takes care of Kitchen Finks and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Collected Company is this deck's worst matchup, without question. Every different shade of it. Every different shade of Collected Company can be challenging, and Anger is fantastic against them, but it also has that extra value against Kitchen Finks, Voice of Resurgence, stuff like that.
So now there's two damnations also on the side.
And keep in mind, not everybody plays both damnations and both angers. I was suggesting trying 2 angers and 2 damnations, but from the sound of it, I think some of the other guys were talking about playing only 3 of those sweepers, but they're not 4. Like they have more room for some other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure. I think that if I could only play 3, I think I would play 2 angers and 1 damnation.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't mind having 1 or 2 of each if I can find the room.
So is there 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now, 2.5 weeks from now, what do you think about, does that 2 anger the gods and 2 damnations become 3 languish instead?
Well, it definitely doesn't become 3 languish because I think that it's too important that what anger brings to the table. Anger of the gods does all the combos you want out of languish anyway, but it's cheaper. I think the anger of the gods exile ability is also very, very important.
No, that's true.
Now, the question of whether or not you want a languish versus damnation is an interesting one. My guess is that you still want the damnation instead of the languish because the reason that we're playing damnation isn't because we want to hit 4 toughness. It's because we want to hit Tarmogoyf. We want to do the whole, because I mean, obviously, it's very cool that languish will let your Tassiger or your angler live through it most of the time. But you get the same value out of anger, and I think that once you pay 4 mana, you might as well go to something that will for sure kill Arcbound Ravager, that will for sure kill Siege Rhino, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So, Miser's Countersquall, you touched on it a little bit. What was your experience of running Countersquall, and do you think it is possible main deck material? Maybe more than one in the side. I love that spell. First of all, like that's my feed on it. Is I was always surprised that it didn't see more play.
I think Countersquall has always been a very, very underrated. It is great. It's much stronger of a sense, and the gate is a good card. It's just like the funny thing is that people forget. Like take Mind Rot versus Blightning. Mind Rot is very rarely playable and constructed. Lightning has at a number of times been a defining card of the format. The only difference is the 3 damage for that red mana symbol.
Yep.
3 damage is a huge thing to tack onto something. So having an effect like that, you're playing a 3 mana spell, and to get 3 extra damage without having to pay extra mana is a big deal. Countersquall is only a 2 mana spell, but you're getting 2 extra damage without even having to pay extra mana. That's really big. I think a lot of control decks, people will think to themselves, oh, I don't care about the damage. When I take over, I win. But this isn't like a true control deck. This is an aggro-control deck. This is a deck that doesn't actually take over the game most of the time. It kind of buys itself some time, tries to not die, and then it just bashes with a fatty, or it throws a bunch of burn after a Snapcaster may hit you. And that extra damage is an extra burn spell. It's often an extra turn off the clock. It usually means, for instance, in the Grand Prix that I played in, I was playing against a mono red deck and ended up in a situation in which I was at 1 life and killed him a turn earlier because I had cast Countersquall, and I didn't have any more. I didn't have anything else I could do. So if I didn't have that Countersquall, he would have gotten, and I killed him exactly. He would have gotten 1 extra draw phase to draw a Lava Spike, Lightning Bolt, anything.
Right. So you bring up an interesting point, referring to it as not a true control deck, as more of an aggro control deck. A lot of people will say Modern doesn't really have a true control deck, or it lacks it. And other people I've heard say they don't understand why you should play a reactionary deck like this instead of a proactive one. Do you have any argument against that?
True control decks in Modern are not super popular. I think that the one that people play the most of is Jeskai, which is a little bit fallen out of favor recently. But Jeskai is, people will play Sphinx's Revelation with a whole bunch of like Lightning Bolts and Lightning Helix and Path to Exile and Electrolyze and Supreme Verdict and Cryptic Command, Dig Through Time, or not Dig Through Time anymore, but they play all those type of cards, and that is pretty close to it. That's basically a true control deck, but I don't think it's very good. I wouldn't go that way if I were playing. And that, in fact, that's why I think what happens is people will put Splinter Twin and Deceiver Exarch in their control deck. And people might put Tarmogoyf and Vendilion Click in their control deck. And people in this case, in the case of Grixis, putting Tasigur and Angler in their control deck. And the more that you support that, the more you're not really playing a true control game, but an aggro-control game, which is, I think, the better, healthier way to look at this Grixis deck, because I think that as long as you view it through the lens of being a control deck, you end up accidentally making you make poor deck building choices like, you play too many slow cards, you spend too much mana on you could do for less properly, how much the efficiency, mana efficiency matters to a strategy. And I think this is not a true control deck at all. I think this is definitely straight up an aggro control deck. And I agree with people who say that very good in Modern right now, because I just don't think it is. I think that the proactive things are too good. You should do something proactive. And Angler is a 1-mana 5/5. Grimag Angler is a 1-mana 4/5 that draws extra cards. Those are very powerful proactive things. So regardless if you're playing Tarmogoyf, Angler, Tasigur, Deceiver, Exarch combo, any of that stuff, I would highly recommend right now, if you like control, play something proactive, because the format is too powerful and there's too many. The control cards aren't good enough to actually take over a game reliably, with the only realistic possible exception being Blood Moon. Literally takes over the game. So if you think that the format is vulnerable to Blood Moon, then that is a card that can let you play a real control game.
Right. So I need to talk about Slay.
Absolutely.
So to the casual observer, Slay seems like a bad choice.
Why is that?
I don't think it's a bad choice, but I had a number of people were like, I didn't even know this card was legal. Why aren't you playing Deathmark? And
so what would the alternative?
It would probably, I think Deathmark, it would be the most common answer to that question, just because the argument is, right, it's 1 mana, kill target Siege Rhino, right? Like that is what it exists for, I think, in most people's minds as a sideboard card.
So I think that Deathmark is and I play a lot more Deathmarks than Slays in Modern in general. Deathmark is what I started with, and I changed it to Slay when I realized I wasn't ever casting Deathmark on turn 1 or 2. Siege Rhino, Knight of the Reliquary, Primeval Titan, Azusa, Raging Ravine, Tarmogoyf, but even him I didn't need to kill him on turn 2. He's too small. The reason Deathmark has been so good in the past is that it kills Bird of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, Wild Nacatl, and Stepwinks. And while the mana creatures are popular now, the Nacatl Stepwinks aren't. That's not the decisive battle right now. The Slay does two things much better than Deathmark. It is an instant, which matters for Raging Ravine, Stirring Wildwood, and Treetop Village, which are some of the best cards against us. But it also just lets you kill it on that turn instead of having to wait till your turn. Or if your opponent surprises you, you don't have to take a hit from their Tarmogoyf. You can just kill it immediately.
And draw a card.
That's the other half, is that the people that you want to kill green creatures against, the extra card matters a lot most of the time. If they play with Siege Rhino and Tarmogoyf, they are probably the type of people who play things like Thoughtseize or Liliana or any sort of attrition type of game, and an extra card is huge against those people. Against a blue deck, like a combo deck that uses Azusa, the Slay is super big, partly because they give their creatures haste, and you really don't want to take a hit from a Primeval Titan. You want to kill it before it hits you,
right?
Before it even attack. But the outside of that, the extra card really does matter a lot, because you're going to try to trade as many of your cards as you can for your opponent's cards after sideboarding in most of those matchups. You're going to play with tons of one-for-one interaction. And so Slay will, in some ways, like a better cryptic command against those people, where it gives you a 2-for-1 that can actually give you a little bit of an advantage beyond just buying you some time. So I'm a big fan of Slay. Most of the white creatures, that's the other thing. So the things that Slay does worse, because it does 2 things better, but it does 2 things worse. It costs more mana. It doesn't kill white creatures that are only white, that's an important distinction, because right now most of the white creatures people play, you can kill with Slay. Knight of the Reliquary, Voice of Resurgence, Siege Rhino, Stirring Wildwood. Now, you can't kill Thalia, and you can't kill... I guess you can kill Kasali Pride Mage also, but it's not like...
New Anafenza. Yeah, the new Anafenza.
But the nice thing is that most people who play with white creatures like Anafenza, they have green creatures in their deck. And then you just use a different removal spell on Anafenza. Instead of using your Slay, use your Lightning Bolt or your Terminate. It's not like you're short on removal spells. Just use a Slay on one of their other creatures.
Yep. And
the fact that it's an instant and a cantrip, I think, is just huge. I highly recommend not playing Deathmark. I think I think that it depends on what you're facing. At the Grand Prix, I was expecting there to be a lot of Tarmogoyfs and Siege Rhinos, and I think that the number of Tarmogoyfs and Siege Rhinos has declined a little bit because of the popularity. I mean, Grixis is very good against those type of decks, and I think that the popularity has waned enough that it is totally defensible to cut the Slay or a different cheap removal spell if you want. You know, it could be Magma Spray, it could be Go for the Throat, it could be Dismember. There's plenty of options. I think it's totally defensible to cut the Slay. I think Slay is good, and I think that if you expect to face a lot of Tarmogoyfs, Knight of the Reliquaries, and Siege Rhinos, it is a good option to have.
Yeah. Well, we're up in the Northeast, which is Jund country. So we have a lot of Tarmogoyfs in this area. So, and then Magma Spray is self-explanatory. Flash Freeze.
Magma Spray. The big one is wanting. Magma Spray. It's nice to have extra removal against a variety of different threats, and having some of them be cheap is super valuable for making sure you come out quick, because Magma Spray, the fact that it kills a Voice of Resurgence without giving them a token is actually super, super helpful against a Collected Company deck.
Right. So that was going to be my next question. So you said that Collected Company was like this deck's worst nightmare.
Oh yeah. It's super bad. It's super bad.
So how do we fix that problem? Is there?
Well, already the list you just described was my suggested update after the Grand Prix.
Okay.
Informed by how bad the Collected Company matchup was. At the Grand Prix, I actually had 1 Damnation, 0 Anger of the Gods, and 0 Magma Sprays. And so
okay.
Playing 2 Damnation, 2 Anger is going to go a long way, I think. Plus, the Blood Crypt is going to help a lot, being able to support both Anger and Damnation, but also just more reliably hitting your first 4 land drops. Because I think that the fact that a Collected Company deck can get ahead of you is really tough if creatures in play that are so durable. And a lot of them are real annoying to try to deal with, like Voice of Resurgence or Kitchen Finks. But if they, and obviously stuff like Collected Company gives them lots of bodies. But I think once you have access to Damnations and Anger of the Gods, you're going to have a much, much better chance of actually trying to fight back. Other things you could do, like if you want to have even more, my estimate would be, or my advice, I guess, would be to play with as much a good mix of cheap interaction. You could put an extra Magma Spray if you wanted, you could put a 3rd Anger of the Gods. It's just a question of how much space are you willing to dedicate to the Collected Company matchup. In general, though, I would, if you want cards specifically for that matchup, the only cards I would just add more Magma Spray, Anger of the Gods, and Damnation. Those are the cards you want, I think.
So Origins is barreling.
one last, actually, if I could.
Sure, no, absolutely.
On that, an important note, and this is already in there, but something that I've noticed a lot of people doing wrong when they just pick up the deck, even though it's a little non-intuitive, but you want Dispel against Collected Company decks. You want 4 Dispels, actually. And the reason for this is that the Collected Company decks, not only is their namesake, because a lot of people will be like, oh, I don't want Dispel, but after Sideboard, those people always end up with a whole bunch of cards like Path to Exile and Celestial Purge and stuff like that. You want to counter that stuff. That is really, really important stuff to counter. And it's really hard to ever have mana open against them. And so having Dispel as a way to counter Collected Company and also protect your Angler and Tasigur from their path is super important. Most of the other counter spells are not that good. Like Cryptic Command, Dispel is a big, big deal against them after sideboarding.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, running a main board, I think is still... Because I don't know of a matchup where you would be sad to have a Dispel in your hand and a blue mana.
Well, Tron is the worst.
Sure.
Tron, it's generally dead against Tron, and it's not good against Affinity. But most people, Dispel is pretty good.
Oh,
however,
Thoughtcast is a sorcerer, isn't it?
It is. Galvanic Blast is usually the only one they would play.
Okay.
But the nice thing about Dispel coming out of the sideboard, though, is that everybody boards in more instants for the most part. So even in the matchups where Dispel is good, it gets even better after sideboarding. So it's one of those cards that even though you might be able to get away with playing with more than 2 Dispels main deck, 1 or 2 Dispels main deck, it isn't always necessary because that's it. Game 1 isn't where it shines anyway. Except against blue decks where it's always just godly.
You're right, yeah. So let's talk Origins.
Sure.
So I would love to start off with the spoiler card that you guys had on the Top Level podcast, which for all of our listeners, if you're only going to listen to one podcast, listen to ours. But if you're going to listen to 2 podcasts, you should definitely listen to the Top Level podcast. And chances are, if you're listening to one podcast, you're actually listening to like 30 podcasts because they're like Pringles, right? Or
Yeah.
Lay's. Lay's was can't eat just one.
Right.
Something. I don't know. Old advertisements. So Infinite Obliteration. It is 1 and 2 black for sorcery. Name a creature card, search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name, and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library.
Yep.
So standard, obviously, unbelievable. Like, this, pay 3 mana, kill all of your Siege Rhinos before they hit the board, seems pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, so cranial extraction effects often, and that's what our term for this kind of effect, where you name a card and take all the copies of it away from somebody. They are very appealing, and they are sometimes very, very good. They are precision instruments, though. They're not something that you just do for value all the time. You got to be real careful there, because if you obliteration somebody's Siege Rhinos, there are games, which is a fine play, but there are games where they didn't draw one, and now you traded a card and 3 mana and didn't get any cards out of it. You got the force out of his deck, and even if you get one out of their hand, you still haven't done that much yet. It is good. It is good because you spent 3 mana and you didn't only want to pay 2 mana to make my opponent discard a Siege Rhino. But you are getting, for 1 extra mana, you're making them discard, you're making them lose all the other Siege Rhinos out of their deck. The place where Infinite Obliteration really wins is either as a tool against somebody who draws 2 copies. Like if you Thoughtseize somebody and you see that they have 2 Siege Rhinos and 1 Elspeth, if you Thoughtseize the Elspeth and then take both Siege Rhinos with the Infinite Obliteration, they're in bad shape. But outside of that, it's more about breaking up decks that are not well-rounded, breaking up decks that are narrow. Either they have few victory conditions, or they're a combo or recursive creature that's difficult to deal with, because Infinite Obliteration stops cards like Death Mist Raptor, for instance, which is notoriously difficult for some people to deal with.
So translating that into Modern, I see this as a great tool against like Emrakul decks, which traditionally give people a lot of problems because he's a big, huge deal. He's virtually, once he hits the table, especially if they cast him like in a Tron match where they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cast Karn, and then if you don't have an answer for Karn, you probably just lose. But if you do have an answer for Karn, just hold on a minute, because Emrakul's coming. we can make this happen.
So I think Infinite Obliteration, it's definitely worth considering. It is possible that ends up being the right way to fight them, but I would guess it is more likely that it ends up not actually being effective enough, because even if you know they have Emrakul and they're not going to get you with like Kozilek or Ulamog or something, even if you know they have Emrakul and you know that's the best card for them to get long game against you, which it probably is, even under such a scenario, if you draw your hate card, you got to consider the opportunity cost, what you could have played instead of this card. And Infinite Obliteration is good against Emrakul, but is it better than a Fulminator Mage would have been? Blood Moon would have been. I mean, certainly not Blood Moon, but maybe your deck isn't a deck that can support Blood Moon.
Right.
If you play Infinite Obliteration to stop Emrakul, you don't stop them from needing to get every single Wormcoil and Gem out of their deck. It's very possible for you to Infinite Obliteration your opponent for his Emrakul and still lose.
Sure.
But if you Infinite Obliteration... but if your Infinite Obliteration was instead a Fulminator Mage or some other hate card that actually attacked their mana, which I think the mana is the biggest weakness, the Achilles heel for a Tron deck. I think that if you can disrupt their mana, their deck is really, really bad. They like them off of Tron. Their deck is full of 7, 8, and 15 casting cost cards.
Right.
That is really hard to do if you're not Troned up. And so, yes, there's no question that if you try to attack their mana, sometimes they're going to draw out of it. Sometimes they're just going to kill you on turn 3. Sometimes they're going to just, beat you anyway. But I think that the same is true for Infinite Obliteration. If you attack their mana, it takes a little bit out of all their threats. But that said, Infinite Obliteration has plenty of other potential. Through the Breach for Protean Hulk, it becomes a big thing. You can actually completely disrupt those combo decks. If you Infinite Obliteration them, they often can't even go off anymore.
Right.
And if you Infinite Obliteration some twin decks, they're not going to be very able to win anymore. The problem, of course, there is that most people have some amount of I'm not sure the spots for Infinite Obliteration. I don't think that Infinite Obliteration is the type of card that has an immediate home that is necessary. I think it is the type of card that you should always have in your short list, because depending on which decks people are playing at any one time, it is a very efficient way to do something powerful. Slaughter Games has been played before, and it's not just because of Slaughter Games being uncounterable. Slaughter Games is the best cranial extraction type effect in the old world, and if you decide that the thing, I really want to be able to, there's a couple different combo decks that if you hit their key creature, they can't win anymore. That's where Infinite Obliteration can really shine, because saving an extra mana against a combo deck can be all the difference in the world.
Right. Yeah, I'm very fond of Slaughter Games. I play a lot of black-red and mono-black or black splash-red kind of stuff. And, man, I hate losing to combo decks. So I love Slaughter Games.
Yeah, Infinite Obliteration is a Slaughter Games for people who want to do it a turn earlier, but are willing to only hit creatures in order to have it a turn earlier. The thing I'm excited about for it in Standard, though, that's where I think it's going to have. I don't know if it'll have a huge impact, but it's kind of a safety valve, because it makes it harder for people to do things like play decks that just have 4 Ojutai and one other threat.
Right.
I also really do like it against the Death Mist Raptor decks. I think that's where I'm going to slot it in first.
It's also kind of fun that like if you play against Mardu Dragons, they have they have like all these Draconic Roars and Foul Tongue Invocations. It is super easy for them to just show you what's in their hands, so you can always name the dragon that they actually have in their hand right now.
It's actually pretty great.
I love that. Plus,
Yeah.
when you just play with when you just have Thoughtseize in your deck anyway, and maybe like Brain Maggot or Duress or whatever else you want, if you just have ways to look at their hand that you were going to do anyway, Infinite Obliteration starts becoming a little bit more attractive as a potential one of, because you can often, once you have enough ways to look at their hand, you can often hit a card with it pretty reliably. And it also is kind of a fun tutor target for Dark Petition, which is one of the new cards that I'm really excited about. 3 black sorcery, search your library for any card you want, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. But, and here's the sweet part, if you have, as you know, if you have 2 or more instants and or sorceries in your graveyard, you get BBB, which is a bigger deal than it might seem, because it makes it so that you effectively are only spending 2 mana on your Demonic Tutor. That's a really, really good deal. There's a ton of stuff that costs 3 mana, so you can put that mana to good use. You can Dark Petition, go get an Elspeth, and then cast Hero's Downfall that was already in your hand for free. Being able to make 2 plays in the same turn is really, really, really powerful. And this is one potential tutor target. You can Dark Petition and go find your 1 copy of Infinite Obliteration to make it so that your opponent will never hit you with a Death Mist Raptor again.
Yeah, we were. So there's one deck right now in Modern that runs a single, the new Sidisi, Undead Vizier. It's actually a Ghostway deck. It's not really a Ghostway deck. People call it a Ghostway deck because it contains 1 copy of Ghostway and is the only deck that does so. But it's really like an Eternal Witness value, like graveyard value kind of deck. And so we had looked at the possibility of switching that Sidisi Undead Vizier out with the Dark Petition, because Spell Mastery as just a value add thing on a card, all the Spell Mastery cards that I've seen are like bonkers. Like you get free, you were already going to get ice cream, and they're like, you know what, have some whipped cream. Do I have to do anything for the whipped cream? Nope, it's free. All you have to do is just play the game as normal, and you will get this like unearned benefit essentially. That Spell Mastery mechanic is like, it's one of those things that's good in Standard. I think it's going to be amazing in Modern.
Well, Modern, you often most people are just getting a couple sorceries and instants in their grave incidentally.
Yep.
Standard, you have to, some decks do, some decks don't. Modern, it's usually pretty easy because of things like Thoughtseize, Thoughtsky, whatever. I think Dark Petition might actually be Legacy playable too. I'm not sure. It might be.
I play Ant in Legacy, and I was playing around with that because you can almost switch the LED Infernal Tutor with it, running Dig Through Time as well. Dig Through Time didn't really seem to work in testing, but Dark Petition, the whole line of play through Past in Flames combo is there, and I think it will slowly start to see play, because now you get to run Force of Will as extra disruption.
Yeah, the ability to chain Dark Petitions is kind of interesting. Like the way you could Infernal Tutor for Infernal Tutor. The only problem with Dark Petition, though, is that if they counter the front end, you're down 5 mana.
Right, there is definitely a downside.
But, that said, you don't have to do the LED thing if you don't want. If somebody counters the Infernal Tutor and you already cracked the Lion's Eye down, and now you just have no cards.
Right.
Whereas if they countering Dark Petition, it's annoying, but you still have your hand, or what's left of it after you ritual out your Dark Petition.
So another card that kind of harkens back to older Magic, the new Draw 7 Days Undoing. Do you have any thoughts on that card? Yeah, so Days Undoing, it's funny because it initially got a huge amount of interest from people because of the fact that every time WotC makes a Time Twister, everybody's so into it. But then there's a backlash because everybody's like, wait a minute, people have been tricked so many times. This is a trick.
they got us with time reversal. We're not going to get tricked. But Days of Doing is really powerful. I don't know what the right home is for it yet, but it is real close to a time twister. It is the most powerful time twister variant printed, I think, since Windfall or Memory Jar. I guess since Yawgmoth's Bargain. I guess that doesn't really count. So I guess basically since Windfall and Memory Jar sort of era. I don't think it's anywhere close to that good contextually because the support isn't there for it. There isn't like a bunch of lands that produce a ton of mana and zero cost artifacts that make mana like there was back then. But I actually think Days Undoing might be used just fair. Like it might be that somebody is able to find places where, because like for instance, I don't think it's necessarily that bad of a sideboard card. If you're playing a fast deck, you might want to, if your opponent casts a sweeper on turn 5, like End Hostilities, on your turn 5, you might play a 2-drop, and then and now you're down a couple cards because they killed 3 things with their End Hostilities. You cast your 2-drop, and you just cast Days Undoing. Now you're ahead. Your opponent's card advantage they worked so hard for and spent all that time on is completely negated. And you have a board. You were able to make the first play because you played something before the Days Undoing. And more importantly, you spent your first few turns putting damage on your opponent. Their life total might be 10 to your 20. I think the Days Undoing, though, is probably... I mean, it's also very possible a combo card, but I think that they would have tested that a lot. My guess is that it is worth considering as a sideboard card or just as a tool in a very fast blue deck.
We were actually just jamming some games before this recording because that was basically my thoughts with it, and I was running it in a blue-red Delver shell that kind of harkened back to the Treasure Cruise lists, but slightly more aggressive, and I slotted it in with a lot of Dispels and Disrupting Shoals so that you can hopefully keep up Countermagic after your opponent also draws 7 and it goes to their turn. And it seemed like a pretty good value edge. And like once you spit out your cards and get some early damage in, you can then just redo it halfway through the game.
There are some fun combos you can do with Days Undoing, though. Like, for instance, if you go turn 2 Spirit of the Labyrinth, turn 3 Days Undoing, I mean, that's a good time. Your opponent might just have 2 land in play. They played a Temple on turn 2, and now they just don't have a hand. You literally mind twisted their whole thing. Now, you don't have a hand either, but at least you have the Spirit of the Labyrinth. Some of the sweet things you can do. Getting back, if you on your opponent's end step, you play a Notion Thief, and then you untap and Days Undoing. Now you have 14 cards and they have 0.
Yeah, and we call that 50% happy because one person is 100% happy and the other person is like 1% happy. So it averages out to pretty close to 50%.
The thing you got to remember is that when you're totally happy and your opponent is completely unhappy, together on the average, you guys are 100% happy because you got to round up.
Yeah.
50% you got to round up.
I having been on the losing end of a Lantern Control deck battle, I can tell you that it does not feel that way when you've gotten milled out by somebody just Codex Shreddering and Ghoul Color spelling you.
Yeah, doing it the slow way.
Ugh.
It's long and painful.
I was like, just kill me.
Yep.
So one of the things that I had seen somebody just talked about, and I remember it may have been today, was the Pia and Kieran Nellar, Chandra's parents. As a possible
wonderful folks.
Yeah, they seem great. Kid's nice, plays well with others. As a possible either complement or replacement for that guy with the wolves, Huntmaster of the Fells, in certain decks, just because of they come in at 4, you get bodies, they do damage. He gains life. In as Jundi 4-drops go, what's your read on the Chandra's parents?
I think Pia and Kieran Noir are playable in standard, but I think that we can do better in modern. I think the Huntmaster of the Fells is a fair bit more powerful because even though you're getting effectively 4 power across 2 bodies, even though you're getting 4 power on both, the Pia and Kieran Noir sitting in play, it is a threat, but it's not that big of a threat. The threat of spending, that's not a very profound impact on the game. It's something. But Huntmaster of the Fells, by contrast, very quickly will and do even more damage and get even bigger and threaten to flip back. And the threat of growing so much bigger and not actually costing any mana to do all that stuff, I think puts a lot more pressure on people than the threat of being able to spend 3 mana and sacrifice an artifact to do 2 damage. So it's a fine card. I just think that there's better things we can do in like Huntmaster of the Fells.
So I was just going to ask about anything you're excited for in Origins, since it does seem like a pretty sweet set.
Oh my god, this set it's not just sweet, it's surprising. There are 200 cards known to the set, and it has way more format changing cards. I mean, it's got so much stuff. This set is definitely not a normal core set at all. But are you speaking to modern specifically or standard as well?
We'll say a little bit of both. Modern specifically, and then anything you personally are hyped for.
All right, so there's several cards I really like here for modern. One card I think is important. That's very obvious, but I think people don't realize how they aren't fully appreciating yet. Is Goblin Pile Driver.
Oh, the Pile Driver. Oh, I was hoping. I was like, come on.
Oh yeah,
you got to give me this.
Oh, God, yeah, Goblin Pile Driver. So modern Goblins was already closer than I think a lot of people realized. And so the fact that this set has a few different options, because Pile Driver is the most obvious of them, but there's also, depending on how you want to build your Goblin deck, it is possible that you might want Goblin Glory Chaser. A 1-mana Goblin that very quickly has 2 power is something to consider at least. The thing I think people don't realize about Goblins in Modern is that some of the tribal rewards in Modern were printed at times in which there weren't really the right support for them. So sometimes there's some cards that are kind of under the radar that are very, very powerful rewards that people just haven't found a home for. The one I'm most interested in for Goblins, it's an enchantment that's 2 and a red. Let me grab it here. It's the one that whenever your guys attack, they get +1 for every other attacker of that type.
Shared Animosity.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There you go. Shared Animosity is an exciting payoff. Because if you're playing with cards like Goblin Guide, Foundry Street Denizen, Goblin Bushwhacker, Legion Loyalist, Goblin Pile Driver, there's tons of token makers. If you want Mogwar Marshal or Krenko's Commander, Dragon Fodder, any of that stuff, it is nice to have another good lord, so to speak, another payoff besides just Goblin Chieftain, which is like the default one. Shared Animosity for and represent an extra 16 damage sometimes, 12 damage, 9, 10 damage, what's your damage? And I think that the Goblin Pile Driver was exactly what the Goblin decks were looking for. It's not like it's actually that insane on its own, it's just that it's one more powerful dimension.
Well, the thing that really excited me about the Goblin Pile Driver reprint is it signaled that Wizards is willing to reprint cards into the modern environment through Standard, which was their stated thing. They're like, we're not bringing cards into the modern card pool in any other way other than Standard. But to take a card from Onslaught that had a ton of cards that would be awesome to have, like just as a group of cards where you could be like, man, this would be really awesome in Modern, but we just can't make all of Onslaught legal for Modern because that blows up the world. So for them to have taken this card and been like, you know what, we're going to take this single card out of Onslaught block and we're going to put it in Standard and by extension Modern. The prospect of that happening more in the future was actually one of the things that excited me the most about this set.
I mean, it is nice to see their commitment to Modern and the support that they're putting where in places that make sense. Hallowed Moonlight is another card that I think has Modern applications. 1 and a white instant.
Yeah.
Until end of turn, if a creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead, draw a card. This card has lots of applications. If you cast it against somebody who does any kind of a Court of Calling or Collected Company, you've effectively cantrip countered it for 2 mana. And if they try to cheat a guy into play, like they try to reanimate something, like an Unburial Rites, boom, you can counter it and draw a card. But even just like if something persists, you can stop it with Hallowed Moonlight. Voice of Resurgence's ability. There's lots of things it stops. There's tons and tons of things that it stops. But in Modern, unlike in Standard, because in Standard it's mostly just it hoses like tokens and can actually be a little bit more proactive. You can blink your opponent's stuff out and then have it not come back because of Hallowed Moonlight. So if you just have anything that can flicker your opponent's creature out until the end of the turn, or even just temporarily, Hallowed Moonlight, and it won't come back.
Yeah, it increases the Flicker Wisp stock quite a bit.
Oh, and there's tons of stuff. Like whether it's stopping a Splinter Twin or stopping, and there's lots of combos that it buys you time against. So that's an exciting one for Modern. Gideon's another one to consider. Gideon, a Kithian hero of Akrois.
Yep.
So outside of the fact that it's just a reasonably powerful card on rate, he's got a lot of little things going for him. He's a human and a soldier, which are creature types that are well supported. But the thing I really think is cool about him is that he is an awesome Ranger of Eos target.
Oh yeah.
If you play a Ranger of Eos deck, having the ability to go start a Kithian, immediately impactful. If you're playing an aggressive deck, you might go find Kithian and Goblin Bushwhacker and trigger them immediately. But if you are playing a Martyr deck, sometimes it's just nice to have another dimension. Figure of Destiny is a classic one for this. Kithian, it's nice that you can do for a little bit less mana and have it have a huge impact on the game. And sometimes you just want both. But any deck that uses Ranger of Eos is going to want to consider having a Kithian to go get as part of their package, part of their toolkit.
Yeah, we had talked about him just as a curve. So like if you go turn 1 Kithian, turn 2 Anafen's Akintree Spirit, turn 3 Brimaz, like that's a stacked board. And unless they're going to come out of the gates on turn 4 and completely destroy you, it's going to be really hard for most decks to deal with that board that you have just amassed in a very short amount of time.
Days Undoing is one I'm excited to try working with in Modern. I could see it potentially in an aggressive deck like Delver. I could also, the one I'm really excited to try breaking it in is a combo deck. I wonder if we might be able to cast Days Undoing relatively quickly. If you can relatively quickly throw down a Spreenleaf Drum, a Mox Opal, a Memnite, a Signal Pest, and a Days Undoing on turn 2.
Seems good.
I'm really excited about Days Undoing in Affinity.
Yeah.
And then another one that is worth considering is Harbinger of the Merfolk. Harbinger of the Tides, blue, 2/2 Merfolk Wizard that when it comes into play bounces something, one of your opponent's creatures, one of your opponent's tapped creatures, and you can pay 2 to cast it with Flash. I don't know if this one will be good enough, but it is worth considering, particularly since it works so well with Aether Vial.
Right.
Merfolk deck, I don't know what the right balance is between Tidebinder Mage and Harbinger of the Tides and any kind of possible interaction you might want to play with. But the nice thing about Harbinger of the Tides is that it lets you interact with Splinter Twin. You can actually Splinter Twin your opponent. You can not only break up their combo, but destroy the Splinter Twin itself with a Harbinger of the Tides. And even if you don't have a Vial, for 4 mana, you can just flash it down. And it does a lot of little things that are easy to underestimate. Like, for instance, it sucks to have to try to bounce an Emrakul, but it could save your life. You know, a lot of people forget you can, because he only has protection from multicolored spells. Sorcery is an instance, right?
Right.
The-
I believe it's spells, and it's not abilities is the thing.
Oh.
yes. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Let's see. Outside of that, there's a whole bunch in this set that I'm into. I don't think this one's going to turn out good, but it's at least worth considering because it might actually be sick. Is Jace's Sanctum. Jace's Sanctum, making your instants and sorceries cost 1 less and making them all scry 1. I think this one's too slow because it costs 4, but it is cost reduction. Another one that is, and this one's kind of funny, but Jesse and Thief. Another one that's probably not good enough, but is probably better than people might realize. Being a 1/3 for 3 with prowess, and whenever it deals combat damage to the opponent, draw a card. If you just put this guy down when you have 1 mana to protect it, it's actually not that hard to protect it with a Dispel or something. And clearing a path for a creature, I mean, it's very easy to hit somebody with a creature in Modern. This one's probably not good enough, but it is a more powerful version of this type of effect than some of the other creatures that are legal that give you this option.
Yeah. Who knows?
Elves in this set.
Oh God, the elves.
Oh yeah. So yeah, Nissa may only be able to get basic forests, but she's still a reasonable card to consider. But the cards that are even more exciting for elf combo deck, or not even combo, just elf decks at all. There's a bunch of them. So Sylvan Messenger, woo, that's another Onslaught card, just like from the same set as Goblin Piledriver. A lot of people wondered about them making a different Goblin Ringleader, but the funny thing is Sylvan Messenger is a reprint. That card was around before. If your deck is, if you're playing a straight elf deck that's just over half elves, I mean, and gets powered up by all your lords. So Sylvan Messenger is a big deal. The 1 mana, the black elf that is Gnarl Root Trapper, black for a 1/1. You can tap and pay life to get a green that can only be used to cast an elf creature spell, and you can tap it to give target attacking elf you control Death Touch until end of turn. So this one, I don't know if it's going to be good enough because you have other options, but I think that it is possible that modern elf decks are in the market for another accelerator, particularly if you're going to add black anyway. And there's this new reason to add black, which is the Shaman of the Pack.
Yes.
1 black-green for a 3/2 that makes your opponent lose life equal to the number of elves you have. That could be a big extra punch, right?
Yeah, that is the reason that Guildleaf Palace jumped from an 80-cent bulk rare to like a $15 card.
Oh, okay.
As soon as that was spoiled, that Auntie's Hovel, the same thing, the black-red goblin land went from like 70 cents to $13. As soon as Piledriver was spoiled. Yeah, and I love rock decks. And Elves of Deep Shadow is like one of my favorite cards because I played during the dark, and just a lot of those old cards really stuck with me. So to see Gnarlroot Trapper as kind of the mirror image of Elves of Deep Shadow with like a little extra secret sauce made me really happy.
And that secret sauce, the ability to give an attacking elf Death Touch, that's actually surprisingly valuable in Modern, I think, because the elf deck can often put together a whole bunch of 2/2s and 3/3s and stuff. But if you face a Tarmogoyf for a siege roll, if one of your mana creatures can just for free take down the Tarmogoyf or Siege Rhino no matter who it blocks, that is a powerful extra dimension.
Many of them are also warriors, and that made me really happy because Bramblewood Paragon is just such a good card. Like, it's...
Oh yeah, even the Dwynen's Elite is a 2/2 elf warrior, and the token it makes is a 1/1 elf warrior.
Yeah, Rocket Train to Value Town. Like,
absolutely. One way, no looking back.
So, yeah, no, I love the elves from this set. I think elves is going to be crazy playable in standard and just got some really great tools for modern.
Yeah, there's so many cards in this set that are modern playable, that are worth considering. You know, like even beyond all the elf stuff, there's lots of little things. Like, for instance, this is such an unassuming little card, but Bounding Crassus. 1 blue-green for a 3/3 flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may tap or untap target creature.
Yeah, Bounding Crassus. We couldn't figure out how to pronounce it.
Yeah, however it's pronounced. Bounding Crassus is a potential Splinter Twin target. You know, if you put Splinter Twin on it, you go off just like all the other 3-cost enablers. But the nice thing about Bounding Crassus compared to the other ones is that it actually hits for 3. So if your deck is on the backup plan, like so many of them are, if you're on the Tarmogoyf beatdown plan, sometimes having a 3/3 body, you know, it's a faster clock. Now maybe you just value the flying or the extra toughness that some people might want it. Let's see. I am not into Honored Hierarch for modern.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think a lot of people are.
No. Renown, any of the renowned creatures, I think are just probably not going to get there. If
the ones that are most likely, I think, to make a dent on modern are, and I don't know. I mean, it's probably not good enough. But Goblin Glory Chaser is worth considering because of the Goblin tribal aspect. And then Relic Seeker is a possibility. It turns into a 3/3, which is now you're already doing something. But the fact that it also just draws you a card and you get to search your deck for your sword or your Batterskull, that's at least worth considering. And it's probably not going to end up worthwhile enough just because there's too much cheap interaction. But I don't think it's out of the question. There is an artifact. There isn't a piece of equipment though that I'm kind of excited about, which is the Helm of the Gods.
Oh yes.
One mana, equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. Being able to play with 4 copies of this and 4 copies of the White Aura for your Boggles deck.
Yep.
What's that White Aura called? The
Ethereal Armor.
Exactly. Yeah, Ethereal Armor. So think Helm of the Gods and Ethereal Armor. Very, very sweet stuff.
Yeah, I am a fan of that card, but I love enchantments. Like I was in hog heaven. Like when Journey came out, I was just like, give me all the enchantments. Like all their creatures too. Give me all the enchantments.
Yes.
Well, that brings up the other new one too. We talked about it.
Oh, Starfield.
Yeah.
Big fat opalescence.
Yep, I'm not sure what that'll end up looking like in modern yet. I would guess that it probably doesn't end up being good enough for modern, but I think it's definitely a very real consideration for standard.
We had just sort of like brainstormed for a couple of minutes. The big thing that I think makes this at least a possibility is returning target enchantment to the battlefield. Like whenever I see return to the battlefield, my ears always perk up because, man, what a powerful effect.
Yeah. Getting dragon, form of dragon into play for free or any kind of powerful enchantment that they might print.
I mean, even just, my first thought was, some sort of enchantment creature like Reanimator. Like you take this and you ramp into it on turn 4, or no, you can ramp into it probably on turn 3, and you have an archetype of endurance in your graveyard, and then your next upkeep rolls around, and then slam, archetype of endurance, back on the board. All your creatures have hexproof, and you just had this giant fat creature. And then if somebody manages to somehow kill him, they'll just come right back. From the value side, though, like really and truly, it's probably something like you play this in the long game with like Detention Sphere, and you just like lock them out. You know, you're like, de-sphere your stuff. Oh, you destroyed it? Great, it'll be back next turn. Don't worry about it. You can't abrupt decay this. You can't. You know, you need to have dedicated enchantment removal for it, which is few and far between. Celestial Purge, like those kinds of effects for white permanents. I can't think of.
Like Erase.
Yeah, well, yeah, Erase would be the silver bullet, but just a more widely applicable card. Like Celestial Purge sees play because it takes care of so much stuff, and it's cheap and it's instant and exiles. Like Celestial Purge is so real for sideboards.
Glare of Heresy, I think, is the closest analog.
Oh yeah, yep, that would do it. That was my standard answer to Elspeth in when I was still playing white. When I was playing white in standard, I was like, oh man, Glare of Heresy, come to me. Let me destroy her for 2 mana.
Yeah, Glare of Heresy, definitely good times killing Elspeth with that one. That's Vryn Wingmate, actually. I'm going to have to take off in a minute, but one I'm really excited about is Vryn Wingmare. That Pegasus.
Yeah.
That give you more Thalias.
Hello? Yep.
Oh, yep.
Sorry. Well, once again, Wi-Fi, so we'll cut off in a minute. But yeah, so Vryn Wingmare, even in addition to Thalia, the not legendary thing, and being able to stack that effect, super powerful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and in a format like Modern, where you can actually realistically go after people's mana a lot more aggressively than you can in Standard. You know, if you play Leon and Arbiter, it's real hard for people to use fetch lands against you.
Right.
And if you play with, who knows, you might even have actual land destruction, but you also might just use stuff like Ghost Quarter or Tectonic Edge or something to help keep the mana lower. But it's kind of exciting, the prospect of playing an actual hate bear strategy in Modern. And it's also just a fantastic card against people who use too many cantrips and stuff.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Thalia was you already have a ton of those, you know? Those are the first 4 in usually.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So lest we run into more internet problems, and certainly we don't want to monopolize your time. You've been so amazingly generous to sit down and talk with us.
No, it's been a blast. No, I'm just gonna. I eventually have to eat dinner.
Oh, fine.
I have somewhere to be in 21 minutes, and it's about a 10-minute drive. So.
No problem. So let everybody know who doesn't already know where can they find you, and where can they get next level magic, next level deck building. Let's get the promo train rolling here.
So I write a bazillion articles for StarCityGames.com. A lot of people don't realize all their articles after a month are visible even for people who don't have subscriptions. But also you can Next Level Magic and Next Level Deck Building are available on the internet, StarCityGames.com. A few other places as well. But Star City is definitely the easiest way to have one of those books sent to you, or ebooks. Let's see, what else? Promo stuff. New music coming later this year, but I'm not supposed to leak that yet.
What?
Yeah. And you can also find me on Twitter, the P. Chapin, or Facebook, Patrick Chapin, the Innovator.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, like I said, we super excited to have you, and you're welcome back anytime. Something happens that tickles your fancy in Modern. We'd love to chat with you about it.
Super, super, super cool. Dude, we didn't even get to Fairy Miscreant yet.
Oh, dude.
Man,
no.
we just did.
Hard.
Or the new Survival Evolutionary Leap.
I
Dude,
think that is
Survival
very
Fittest,
close to my
it's
new
just like,
new favorite card. Even just for standard, it's so good. Just because people looked at it and like, oh, it's not Survival of the Fittest in a combo sense, but it doesn't have to be. It's just
Right.
blank all of your removal.
God.
Let me make sure I understand this correctly. I can sacrifice my Eternal Witness, ... I'm like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. Buy a ticket to the value train. And
Awesome.
for 1 green at instant speed, just like, yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine. God, like we are already, we had talked about, like, we're just going to draft the hell out of this set. And then there's so many existing homes and so many cards that are like just so close. Like they're just waiting for somebody to be like, oh God, like, we already have waffles and they just printed syrup. Like, all we need to do is put them together and it'll be amazing. Like, we have so many waffles and they are just, this set is full of syrup.
awesome. Well, definitely looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Alrighty. Thanks so
Have a
much.
good
Thanks, you too. Bye. So thank you again to Patrick Chapin for coming onto the podcast and talking with us for such a generous amount of time. You can certainly check out his podcast with Michael Flores, the Top Level Podcast. It's on iTunes. It should be very easy to find. Like he said, he's on Twitter at the P Chapin. There is somebody on Twitter that's at the Chapin. That's not him. So don't follow that guy. We don't know what he's doing. But we are just about wrapped up for this week. Thank you so much for listening, as always. If you have any questions for us, you can email us, thoughtseizeu@gmail.com. You can send us a tweet. We are at T1Thoughtseize. You can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/TurnOneThoughtseize. And you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, MTG Cast, and directly on our website, TurnOneThoughtseize.com. And remember, kids, if you're going to get on the rocket train to Value Town, make sure you get off at Eternal Witness Station.